everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5-Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Hey, what's happening, Rush Nation? It is Monday. It is time for another waiver wire. We're already talking about week 3. The season is rattling along. Amazing set of games yesterday. The product, again, as I said last week, just continues to deliver week on week on week. It's phenomenal. It's great to have. But let's get these waiver wire picks through. Very thin at quarterback this week on the waiver wire. There is a couple of options out there. I'm going to use Yahoo this week just because I did another show on Waiver Wire and they asked for Yahoo. So I've done the research on Yahoo. So we can go with Yahoo ownership. I find these two platforms, Yahoo and ESPN, are relatively similar. I have a preference for ESPN, but that is what it is. First quarterback is 50% owned on Yahoo leagues. It's Russell Wilson. Had a good game yesterday, throwing the ball deep. I know it came up, a lot of it was garbage time chasing a game and a bit of a lost cause. And they almost came back and won it with that late touchdown. They missed the 2-point conversion. But Russell Wilson is still available in half of leagues. If you lost Anthony Richardson this week and you're in need of an option, then, Russell Wilson, good matchup against the Dolphins in week 3. It's a good short-term option, absolutely. If you want someone maybe small for the slightly longer term, Derek Carr's out there, 40% owned. Now, he's got a better schedule over the next few weeks. Not as good in week 3, but then he's got the Buccaneers in week 4. So there's some decent matchups to target, probably slightly better in the long term. The Saints have an easier schedule over the course of the season. So, there's some points there to be had for Derek Carr, but they're the two options there at quarterback this week. Moving on to, by the way, fab options. Just don't spend that much on them. 1-2% fab. Don't spend loads of money on quarterbacks. It's just not worth it at all. Moving on to the running backs this week. I want to talk about Roschon Johnson. He's 38% owned. He's currently the RB21 on the season. That role is getting bigger. Yes, you can chalk off yesterday's game against the Buccaneers. One of the best run defenses in the NFL. Not many teams and not many players are going to run up big points and big yards against them. And I think that's why I really like Roschon Johnson this week, because week 3 is priming to a bigger role. Donta Foreman was a healthy scratch. Johnson is getting a lot more work. It's only going to get bigger from there. The Bears offense is going to get better. It can't get any worse. So it will get better there. But he's starting to get significant work, as I said. RB for 21 on the season. Not going to be on anyone's radars this week. So I'd be picking him up. You can get him for under 5% of fab. Probably 2-3% is what you can probably get him for. But if you really want him, and I do want him, I'd be spending 5% of fab on him. And next up, Zach Moss. He is the waiver wire ad that people will target. 50% owned. He's currently the RB24 on the season, and that's just after one game he didn't play. In week 1, obviously, he had 18 carries for 88 yards and a touchdown yesterday. He also had 4 receptions for 19 yards. And I think if Anthony Richardson is going to miss time, Zach Moss will benefit. There is a cap to how far or how long you're going to have Zach Moss for. And when Jonathan Taylor comes back, if he comes back, then he will take over that role completely. But if you've lost Saquon Barkley, who's not going to play Thursday Night Football by the looks of it, or David Montgomery, who's going to be out for 2 weeks, minimum, maybe longer, you need a running back to plug in. Zach Moss is probably the priority ad this week. You're probably going to have to drop 10%, maybe even 15% fab to get him. And it is a limited role. You're only going to get him for 2-3 weeks, maybe more. Could last longer. Depends on what happens with Jonathan Taylor, but there is a risk there. So you don't want to spend all your fab on him. But if someone does, then, that is the way that it goes. So just be a bit cautious on there. But he is going to be a standalone top 15-20 running back. Although he does have the Ravens this week, tougher matchup, maybe not so great, but he is the only running back out there that's going to have this kind of volume. So you're going to need to pay up a little bit for him, but don't go too crazy. Justice Hill, he's running back 22 on the season, 44% owned. He had the most touches last night, only by 1, but 3 receiving targets for 12 yards. I mean, that's really useful in a PPR league. It looks like he might start to get some of that work, which would be really useful. And he's good. So he's a standalone value with handcuff ability to where he will get an accelerated role if Gus Edwards goes down. So I like having Justin Hill. I don't love it. Like I'd spend 5, 7, maybe even 8% of fab. I'm not going crazy on Justice Hill because there is a limited cap there to what you can get, but I do like it, so worth a spend on that. Let's talk about Jerome Ford. He's 11% owned. He hasn't played yet. He plays tonight. 15 carries in week 1. Yes, the yardage wasn't great, but that kind of volume in a run-first offense is very valuable. I talked about him last week. I'd be adding him this week. Only 11% owned, as I said, but depends on what he does tonight. But that handcuff insurance value as well, I think you are looking 5% of fab or less is a good value. But if he goes off tonight, or if Chubb gets injured, then that's going to go out the window. Tajay Spears, he's 17% owned. He's getting increased volume, 8 touches in week 2. Plus, he also is starting to get some targets in this offense. So it looks like that they don't trust Chig to get some receiving volume. And it looks like it's going to Tajay Spears. So he's going to have a little bit of standalone volume, sort of back end of the running back 36 conversation, so running back 3 conversation. But if there is a injury to Derrick Henry, then you are looking at that insurance going forward. So worth 2%, 3% of fab, not more than that. But you're buying that insurance of if something happens to Derrick Henry, Tajay Spears is going to get trusted for a huge workload. So they're my 5 running back ads this week. Let's talk about wide receivers. Number 1 ad this week is Tutu Atwell, 25% owned, wide receiver 18 on the season, and everyone's talking about Puka Nacua, and no one's talking about Tutu Atwell. Tutu Atwell, 17 targets with 13 receptions, nearly 200 yards receiving on the season. Good air yards, nearly 20% of the team's targets. But I think his role is more cemented than Puka Nacua is. I think Puka Nacua, if Kupp comes back, is going to see a bit of volume decrease, and I think they could maybe split that role. Whereas with those air yards, it's suggesting to me that Atwell is going to have a bit more of a solid role. He's kind of taken over what we expected Van Jefferson to do. So he's my number 1 ad. I'd be spending 10% of fab on Tutu Atwell. I'd feel comfortable with that. I think he's got a more locked in role going forward. If you have to push a little bit more, that's fine. Don't go over 15% of fab. Josh Reynolds, my number 2 ad on the week. He's wide receiver 10 on the season, 12% owned in Yahoo leagues, 13 targets, 9 receptions, 146 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's going to be on everyone's radar this week. You're going to have to pay up a little bit for him. Again, capping it at around about that 10 to 12%. There is that worry that Jameson Williams does come back and limits this role. But there's also the chance that he doesn't. James Williams hasn't done anything in the NFL. So you have got this opportunity for Reynolds to earn these targets and keep them. And he's been exceptional this season. So definitely be looking to add Josh Reynolds if you can this week in your league. But yeah, don't go crazy on that. Robert Woods, let's talk about Robert Woods again. 9% owned, ownership slowly creeping up, but still not anywhere near high enough. He's a 35% target share, 12 catches, 131 yards, almost scored at the weekend. I talked about him last week. You just got to add him. You can get him cheap, 2-3% of fab, and you're getting him nice and cheap in PPR leagues. He's a must add. The Texans are throwing the ball 45 times a game at the moment. So you've got to get a piece of that. I think they're just going to let Stroud get acclimatized by throwing the ball as much as possible. So get involved and get Robert Woods. You want pieces of this offense because they are going to get targets, and he is an exceptional receiver. He has proven it over the years. Jaden Reed, he is 10% owned. Again, he's a player that people are going to look at. I think there's an opportunity for him to grow in this role. 13 targets on the season. He's wide receiver 25 on the season. I think there's an opportunity here for Jaden Reed to expand his role. It looks like they're manufacturing targets for Reed. They're really trying to get him involved in acclimatize. They're bringing him on slowly, but I think he's going to start to go a little bit more. So I like adding Jaden Reed. I think you might have to pay up a little bit for him, but don't go more than 10% of fab for Jaden Reed. And lastly, Marvin Mims. 23% owned. It'd be interesting to see if that role is continuing to increase. It looked like he was on the field a bit more this week. Need to see the snap counts, but I think for me, getting the air yards, he made the big play. He's got the draft capital. Courtland Sutton, I've got some question marks about him at the moment. I think there's someone that is going to give way to Marvin Mims, whether that's Judy, whether that's Courtland Sutton, remains to be seen. But that Peyton offense is going to get better. Russell Wilson's starting to look like a bit like the old Russell Wilson. I think Marvin Mims is going to have a go going forward. So speculative ad, wouldn't spend more than 1-2% because I think you're buying now cheap to see if it grows into a role. And if it doesn't, then you don't want to waste too much fab on him. Let's talk about tight ends. For short-term play, Zach Ertz this week. Got the Cowboys, not the worst matchup for tight ends. It's worse for the other offensive positions, but he's seeing huge volume. He's got over 30% of the team's targets right now. So you definitely want to get a piece of him. 10% owned. He's available. He's available out there. And then lastly, Logan Thomas. Logan Thomas is only 3% owned, but he's starting to trend up towards a good volume as well. Massive increase in week 2, a former top 5 tight end. So he's been around the bush a little bit, but you can definitely grab him quite cheap. Both those tight ends, I think you can get for 2-3% of fab. I don't think you need to spend much money on him. I don't really have a kicker streamer of the week. I think people aren't overly interested in kicker streamers. If you are, then reach out to me and I'll give you a couple. But really, we're seeing the kicker position kind of plateau. There's plenty of guys you can pick up off the waiver wire, but there isn't really that many injuries other than to Greg Zuerlein. So just pick up somebody that you are comfortable with and start them because the position has plateaued quite considerably. Technical hitch. So sorry about that. Screen locked. But let's go with the DST streamer of the week. DST streamer of the week is going to be the Jacksonville Jaguars, the 49% owned. They've got Houston. I think with Houston throwing the ball that much, the Jags are making plays on defense. I think you're going to see a turnover or two this week. So I like the Jacksonville Jaguars defense this week. I'll be lining up against them against Houston and hopefully profiting some points from there because it should be a good week for them. So just to remind you, Saquon Barkley looks like it's going to be an ankle strain. Looks like he's going to be out. He'll be out for Thursday Night Football, almost certainly. Be surprised if he comes back. And then you need to monitor that because the last time he had an ankle injury, he did suffer significantly. So let's hope we don't rush him back. He's got a Monday Night Football game after that. So he's got a nice long 10-day period where he doesn't play, which is really good. So hopefully doesn't play Thursday, has a nice bit of rest. And he should be fine for week 4. Fingers crossed. That's what we're hoping. Dave Montgomery is going to be out for a couple of weeks. Craig Reynolds is someone that you can add on the waiver wire, but he's only going to have a 2-week role. I don't know how big that role is going to be. So speculative. If you want to get ahead of the game in deeper leagues, you can add him. It should cost a buck or two in fab. Matt Breida will be the same. I'm not really convinced Matt Breida on Thursday Night Football is going to have a huge game, but if you need someone desperately, Matt Breida's the guy you want to plug in for volume. So you can get him, I reckon, a few percent of fab, but don't go crazy because it looks like it could only be a 1-week play. But keep an eye on the news in the next 24 hours. That situation could change. I'm recording this sort of Monday afternoon. So I think that's going to do it. Check out this week. We've got the Dynasty podcast tomorrow with Hannah, and she's going to have another great guest. And I'll be back with the matchup pods and rankings on Wednesday, early rankings on Wednesday. And of course, the injury situation meant that podcast wasn't obsolete. There's a lot of useful information, but a lot of players are ranked, didn't play this week or were downgraded status. But it is there for good early thinkings and should help you set your lineups for Thursday. Thursday, we've got an amazing guest for the flagship show, author of a recent book here in the UK. So you could probably work out who it is from there, but do check that out. It should be a really good podcast. And then Friday, Fast Action Friday, those guys go through with everything with some interesting stats for the week and get you ready for the weekend. So that's going to do it for the Waiver Wire show for week 3. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in and for being with us and being loyal supporters. You can check out me on the socials at Murf_NFL. Please do rate, subscribe to the podcast. Please do rate the podcast. I haven't had a rating for a while, so it'd be really good if someone could rate the podcast and give it a rating, because that really helps with the algorithms and helps to get seen by more people. So we'd really appreciate that. And check out all the work I'm writing over at Fantasy Pros and at Pro Football Network. I wrote quite a lot of pieces this week. So I really appreciate all the support that comes from there. And I've also recorded the Pro Football Network podcast today. So please join me with that with Carl Yates and Derek Tate. We go through, waiver wires. So, but we go through a lot more details, a lot more stats. So do check that out. But appreciate all that you do. Appreciate everything that you've done for us. And as always, don't forget, until next time, keep rushing.